great pleasure to be here with you today. I often like to start with my favorite quote by Benjamin Barber, an eminent political scientist. He said, am I blocking my own account? He said, I don't divide the world into the weak and the strong, or the successes and the failures. I divide the world into the learners and the non-learners. Why would anyone become a non-learner? We're born with such an irrepressible, exuberant desire to learn. You never see an unmotivated baby. No, that's wrong. Instead, we see babies being infinitely curious and addressing the most difficult tasks of a lifetime with tremendous gusto. And yet, many of the things we do when we try to help or motivate our students are turning them into non-learners. When we put too much emphasis on who's gifted, or measuring talent, or getting the highest grade on a test, or getting into the one right school, we create students who feel they have to be infallible. And infallible is the enemy of learning. Employers are already coming to me and saying, we've created a generation of young workers who cannot get through the day without an award. So, how do we make sure our students remain learners? That's what my work is about, and that's what I'd like to share with you. In my work, we find that some students have a fixed mindset about their abilities. They believe that their intelligence is just a fixed trait. They have a certain amount, and that's that. As you'll see, this is the mindset that turns students into non-learners because they're so worried about how much they have. Every time they approach a test, will I look smart? Will I not look smart? That learning takes a back seat. But other students have a growth mindset. They believe that intellectual abilities are things that can be developed throughout life, through effort, strategies, persistence, and good teaching. Now, they don't necessarily believe that everyone's the same or that anyone can be Einstein, but they understand that even Einstein wasn't Einstein until he put in many, many years of dedicated, passionate labor. Here are some questions I'm often asked about the mindsets. Maybe it's good to have a growth mindset, but which one is really right? And what's so exciting is that neuroscience is showing us, practically on a daily basis, the tremendous plasticity of our brains, the ability of our brains to learn, grow, and even reorganize with learning and experience throughout life. Cognitive psychologists are beginning to identify the components of intelligence, and they're figuring out how to teach it. So it's a really exciting time to be studying the mind and its growth. I think you'll also be interested to know that Alfred Binet, the man who invented the IQ test, had a radical growth mindset. He believed the most fundamental capacity to learn could be transformed through education, and that's what his career was about. He created curricula that made kids smarter. Well, so why did he make up this test? The Paris public schools asked him to create a test that would identify the children who were not profiting from the current curriculum. So he made up this test just to see who are some kids that might be behind other kids in certain areas. He was beside himself that Americans started using the test to say we were measuring intelligence. He didn't think that test captured this multifaceted thing called intelligence. And even worse, we said we were studying fixed intelligence. But he couldn't stop us. And I have a confession to make this evening. Some of the worst culprits were at my university, Stanford. My life's mission is to undo their mischief. Do students hold the same mindset in different areas? Not necessarily. You know, you could have a growth mindset about athletic ability and a fixed mindset about intellectual ability, or vice versa. Even with intellectual ability, within intellectual ability, someone can think that verbal areas can be developed, but math, that's fixed, or vice versa. So the mindset a student holds in a certain area will have a powerful influence on their motivation in that area. Can mindsets be changed? Yes. Stay tuned. So how do these mindsets work? They work by creating a whole psychological world for students where everything has a different meaning. And I'd like to take you through those worlds now in terms of 3 mindset rules. So if you're ready, here we go. In a fixed mindset, because you only have a certain amount of fixed intelligence, the cardinal rule is look smart at all times and at all costs. And maybe even more important, never look dumb. But in a growth mindset, because you can develop your abilities, the cardinal rule is learn whenever and wherever you can. We saw this in a big study we did of hundreds of students who were making that difficult transition to 7th grade. It's a time when the work gets harder and a lot of students start turning off to school. We measured their mindsets, that is, we saw, did they believe intelligence was fixed or was something that can be developed? We measured their attitudes about learning, and then we monitored their grades, especially in math, over the next 2 years. Well, the first thing we found was, yes, indeed, those who believed intelligence was fixed told us their #1 goal in school was look smart, don't look dumb. But those who endorsed a growth mindset said they cared about grades, but they cared even more about learning. So let's look at those grades. What we found was that although the 2 groups had entered 7th grade with similar past achievement test scores, by the end of their first term, when this work got harder, their grades jumped apart and continued to diverge over the next 2 years. The only thing that differed were their mindsets and this emphasis they placed on learning. One theme of my talk is going to be this. A growth mindset, through this emphasis on learning, through this deep engagement with the learning process, creates better outcomes. But the students aren't going for those outcomes in and of themselves. Those outcomes are a byproduct of engaging deeply and effectively in the learning process. So let's look at another example. Here we said, who cares about grades more than anyone on earth? We decided to study pre-med students at an Ivy League university. They've lived their lives for this moment. Their parents have lived their lives for this moment. And yet, the students with the growth mindset said they cared, again, even more about learning than they did about grades. And look what happened. Again, they earned significantly higher final grades in their pre-med organic chemistry course than students with a fixed mindset. So how did they do It's not that they came in with bigger abilities, but here's what they did. We found first that they studied more deeply because they wanted to really learn and understand the material. But maybe even more important, if they didn't do well on the first exam or two, and most of them did not do well on the first exam or two, they did everything in their power to improve. They went and saw the teaching assistant, the professors, went over the test and the material. They found older students who had taken the course before and done well. They formed study groups, and then they studied all the more. As a group, they did recover through these means from initial poor performance, and that's why they did so well. But what did the students with a fixed mindset do? They thought, well, my ability will take me there. If I have ability, it will get me where I want to go. And when it didn't, they got discouraged, they got unmotivated, but they didn't do anything to learn better. As a group, if they did poorly initially, they did not recover. This brings us to the second mindset rule, incredibly important. This is about effort. In a fixed mindset, effort is a bad thing. They believe that if you have ability, things should come naturally. You shouldn't need effort. And they also believe that if you have to expend effort, it means you're not good at something. They subscribe to Homer Simpson's motto, trying is the first step toward failure. But in a growth mindset, the belief is that effort is a great thing. It's what activates your ability, it allows you to use it to the fullest, and it increases your ability over time. Students in a fixed mindset think that things come easily to people who are geniuses. But those with a growth mindset say even geniuses have to work hard for their great discoveries. So who's right? Do geniuses work really hard? Or do things come easily to them because they're geniuses? Some of the most exciting work in psychology now by Anders Ericsson and others, written about by Malcolm Gladwell in the book Outliers, shows there is one thing that separates geniuses from others who might once have been just as talented. There's one thing that separates people who go to the top of their field or who make great creative contributions from others who were once equally talented. And that is the passionate, dedicated, relentless labor that they put into developing the abilities in their area. Erickson calls this deliberate effort. And deliberate effort, but deliberate effort, it's not 10,000 hours of noodling around. It's 10,000 hours of pushing out of your comfort zone to learn new things. It's not just building on strengths, it's systematically addressing weaknesses that will hold you back. So effort is absolutely essential for long-term, sustained, and unusual achievement. And yet, those students with a fixed mindset don't believe in it. Since I wrote my book, Mindset, I get letters from people who were once child prodigies. Many of them never finished college, and many of them have never found satisfying work. What happened? Well, when they were children, people made them a false promise. People said, oh, you're so smart, you're going to be X, you're going to be Y. And so they sat there with their brilliance, and nothing happened. No one told them you actually have to do something to turn your ability into accomplishment. Mostly, they worked. Mostly, they pursued something until they reached the edge of where their natural ability could take them. Then they dropped it and went on to something else. They never learned how to work hard. I think that happens to a lot of our students, especially the ones who do have natural ability or to whom things come easily. Everyone tells them how smart they are. And they say, well, I don't have to work hard, but the kids who aren't being called smart do. Well, guess what? One day they do have to work hard. It becomes difficult, and they can't do it because being smart means never having to work hard. And now, what are they going to do? Start working hard and not be smart? Many of them retire at this point. So everyone thinks, oh, you're so smart, if only you worked. That's exactly what they want to hear. And that's exactly why they're not working hard. They don't want to feel dumb, they don't want to look dumb. And worst of all, would be working hard and not doing well. So I believe that the fixed mindset beliefs about effort are some of the worst beliefs a student or anyone can have, and are a tremendous cause of underachievement. We should never allow advanced students to coast. Everyone needs to be challenged. Everyone needs to be taught how to work hard and how effort is the vehicle through which your abilities come to fruition. A few years ago, I was speaking to the top athletes in another country, and they told me not one of them had been number one as a teenager. The number ones coasted on their natural talent and eventually disappeared. They were overtaken by the people I was talking to. So the people I was talking to, the ones who were going to the World Championships and to the Olympics, had been number 4 or 8 or even 16, but they knew they had to do something if they wanted to get to the top, and they did it. Mindset rule number 3, our final rule. In the face of setbacks, well, in a fixed setback, students believe that a failure measures them. So it's about me. It means I don't have ability. And what do you do when you've been unmasked as not having ability? They hide their mistakes. So maybe people will still think they're smart. They conceal their deficiencies, often to themselves. They'll say, oh, I'm bored with this, but they're really concealing the deficiency. But in a growth mindset, setbacks, a natural part of learning. What can I make of this? How can I take a lesson from it and go forward more effectively? So the third rule is capitalize on the mistakes. Confront your deficiencies. Remember that study I was talking about before, hundreds of students making the transition to 7th grade? We asked them what they would do after a poor performance on an initial test in a new course. And here's what they said. In a fixed mindset, they said, I'd spend less time on this subject from now on, and I would try to cheat on the next test. Well, think about it. The setback, the poor score, the bad grade, meant they didn't have ability, they don't like effort, and they don't believe in it. So cheating becomes a much more attractive option. But in a growth mindset, the student said, I'd work harder in this class from now on. I'd spend more time studying for the tests. Let's see this in action in the brain. Moser and his colleagues 2 years ago, published this study. They have students working on a task and occasionally making errors. The brain, that red-hot brain you see on the right, is the growth mindset brain. It's the growth mindset students focusing on the error, processing the error, and correcting the error. The oh-so-cool brain on the left is the fixed mindset brain, fleeing from the error as quickly as possible. You can see how this would lead to differences in learning over time, and it did. But the good news is this. They also showed that when they taught students a growth mindset, their brains started showing the electrical activity on the right. So it's not an inherent property of one brain or another. It's a mindset that causes you to embrace errors and learn from them versus a mindset that causes you to run from them as quickly as possible. In countless studies now, we've shown that a fixed mindset does not give students a way of recovering from failures or setbacks or difficulty. They get discouraged about their abilities and give up. They may retreat to their comfort zone. They might try to save face, blaming other people or acting bored, or they may try to find someone to feel superior to. In one study we did with Stanford students, we brought them one at a time into our lab and we gave them a really hard test. After they performed poorly on the test, we gave them a choice of what they wanted to do before they worked on another section of the test. Did they want to look at the past exams of people who had done a lot better than they had and maybe learn their strategies? Or did they want to look at the tests of people who had done a lot worse than they had? The students, and I see from your little chuckles you know where this is going. The students with a fixed mindset overwhelmingly chose to look at the exams of people who had done a lot worse. And that was pretty bad. And afterwards they said, oh, you know, I really feel like I'm on top of this material. But they had only looked at the terrible strategies that the lowest performers had used. Whereas those in a growth mindset overwhelmingly looked at the exams of people who did a lot better and learned from them. Where do these mindsets come from? I say here, our language tells students what we value. We may not realize how much our language, and particularly the way we praise and give feedback, conveys to kids what our deepest values are. We undertook our research on what praise communicates at the height of the self-esteem movement, when the self-esteem gurus were telling parents and teachers, praise your kids, tell them how smart they are, how talented and brilliant they are, at every opportunity. This will give them confidence, resilience, motivation. I'm here to tell you that praising ability backfires. In every study we've done, it undermines children's motivation and resilience. We just published a study looking at mothers' praise to their babies when the babies were 1 to 3 years of age. And we found that the mother's praise predicted the child's mindset and desire for challenge 5 years later. So as I was saying earlier today, now when I see a mother in an airport saying how brilliant her little baby is, I intervene. But let me tell you about some studies we've done with pre-adolescent kids. Just give you a sense of the process and how it works. And let me tell you also, we did this study over 6 times with kids from all over the country, just to make sure that our striking findings were repeatable, and they were. In these studies, we brought kids one at a time to a room in their school. We gave them 10 problems initially from this nonverbal IQ test. They tended to do pretty well because the problems were matched to their age. And after those 10 problems, we gave everyone one form of praise. Some kids got intelligence praise. Wow, that's a really good score. You must be smart at this. Some got process praise. Process praise is praise for effort, strategies, focus, persistence, some aspect of the process the child engaged in. And here it was effort. Wow, that's a really good score. You must have tried really hard. And a third group was just told, wow, that's a really good score for purposes of comparison, kind of like good job. We found it wasn't as good as the process praise, but it wasn't as bad as the intelligence praise. So what happened? The first thing we found was, yes, indeed, praising intelligence put kids into more of a fixed mindset. It said, I can look at your performance and know about your deep, abiding intelligence. Whereas praising the process put kids into more of a growth mindset. But to me, the most astounding finding was this. Praising intelligence instantly made students into non-learners. After the praise, we gave students a choice. Hey, what do you want to work on now? Something hard you can learn from. You might make mistakes, but you'll learn something important. Or something kind of in your comfort zone, you're already good at it, and you'll do well. The students praised for their intelligence rejected the difficult task they could learn from. And the majority chose the easier task where they could keep on looking smart. I like to say they didn't want to risk their newly minted gifted label. But the students who were praised for the process overwhelmingly wanted the task they could learn from. In 2 of the studies, over 90% eagerly chose a hard task they could learn from, even though they would make mistakes. There was nothing at stake for them. Later, we gave everyone a difficult set of problems. And guess what happened? The ones praised for intelligence lost their confidence, no longer enjoyed the task. Because if your number one goal is to look smart and you're not, how much fun can that be? And even when we went back to the easier problems, their performance looked bad. But those who were praised for the process remained confident. They saw these were harder problems, so they worked harder. Many of them said the hard problems were their favorite. And when we went back to the easier problems, their performance had shot up. They were actually now smarter on the IQ test. This happened, we think, because they remained engaged on the hard problems and learned new, more effective strategies that they could put into effect when we took them back to their age-appropriate problems. But there's more. We told the kids, hey, we're going to go to another school, and we bet that school would love to know about your experience. Here's a piece of paper. Don't put your name on it. So we left a few lines they could write about their experience, and we left a space for them to report the scores they had earned on the problems. Would you believe that almost 40% of the students praised for intelligence lied? And only in one direction. 38% of them wrote down a higher score than they had actually earned. What does this mean? They were anonymous. They were writing to someone they didn't know and would never meet. I think it means that in a fixed mindset, struggling on something, even something you've never seen before, that's really hard, it's undermining, it's humiliating. It negates your status as a smart person and has to be hidden. I don't think that's how we want our kids to be. I think we want to give them the kind of praise that makes them relish difficulty and thrive in the face of it. So how do we do that? I talked about effort. Here are some other things to praise. Struggle. Not long ago, someone from another country said to me, in your culture, struggle is a bad word. I said, you're right. Rarely do you come home at the end of the day and say, honey, I had the most fabulous struggle. No, usually you're crawling, dragging yourself over the threshold, perhaps in need of some form of libation. But why isn't struggle a good word? What does it mean? It just means you've worked hard towards something you value. So I say to parents, why don't you sit around the dinner table and say, who had a fantastic struggle today? And you share what you're struggling with, what you're trying to master, learn, or overcome. And have your kids do that too. Ask, what are you going to struggle with tomorrow? Because great accomplishments in life, be it in sports or business or relationships, often involve a lot of effort over a long period of time. And we want that struggle to be something that kids are proud of. Persistence in the face of setbacks, tremendously important, but not just effort. The strategies kids use, the choices they make as they do a project or a piece of work. And it's not just praise. It's showing interest, it's giving encouragement. Kids just want to be listened to, noticed, and appreciated. So let's do that for the process. The very choosing of difficult tasks is worthy of our praise. And all in the context of the ultimate values of learning and improving. I'm often asked nowadays, how are you different from Tiger Mom? And there was actually a hilarious skit on The Daily Show, Jon Stewart's show, about how I'm different from Tiger Mom. Well, the answer is, Tiger Mom wants that outcome, or she will burn your stuffed animals. But a growth mindset, it isn't about going for the outcome at all costs. It's about learning and improving. And again, that outcome is a byproduct. So let me give you some examples. Yesterday, you might have said these things before you heard about the growth mindset. Look, you got an A without really working. You're really good at that. But you hear that bad message? The child hears, oh, you only think I'm good at something when I don't have to work at it. Or you did that so quickly and easily. That's impressive. Why is it impressive? They already knew how to do it, obviously. But also the child hears, you're only impressed if I do something quickly and easily. And they're not going to do something in the future that they can't do quickly and easily. So what should you say? Oh, you got an A without working. An A is nice, but oh, you must not be learning much. Kind of my condolences. You were cheated. Or you did that so quickly and easily. I'm sorry I wasted your time. Let's do something you can learn from. Do you hear that value system being communicated? Easy is boring and a waste of time. hard, is fun, and worthwhile. That's the new value system. Recently, I've fallen in love with a new word, yet. I learned of a high school in Chicago where they have to pass 84 units to graduate. And if they don't pass a unit, they don't get a failing grade. They get the grade not yet. And you can just feel the difference, because a failing grade means you're nowhere. You're no good at this. But a not yet means, hey, you're on that learning trajectory. You're just not at the finish line. And the students talk unabashedly to each other about how many not yets do you have? How many not yets do you have? And then they elect to take the unit and master it on their own. So we're doing research on that now. But in the meantime, listen to the difference. I'm not good at math yet. Get back on that learning curve. I can't do it yet. I tried, but it didn't work yet. And it just creates a whole growth mindset around this not yet. Once we saw that mindsets conferred so many benefits on kids, we asked, could we bottle it and teach it? And we've done this many times now with kids of many different ages. And in general, we find increase in grades, achievement test scores, decreases in school dropouts, and so forth. I just want to give you an idea of how we've done some of these studies. Actually, this was our first mindset changing experiment. In this experiment, we took 7th graders, again, making that difficult transition. Many of them were already showing declining grades, especially in math. And we divided them into 2 groups. Half of them, the control group, got 8 sessions of great study skills, skills that their teachers said were important for them to succeed this year. They were taught in an entertaining way, and the kids really liked them and learned them. But the growth mindset group had 8 sessions that contained the growth mindset with the study skills. The growth mindset sessions kicked off with this article, "You can grow your intelligence. New research shows the brain can be developed like a muscle." And they learned that there were these neurons in their brains, millions and millions, and that every time they pushed out of their comfort zone to learn something new, the neurons in their brain formed new connections. And over time, by forming these connections, they could become smarter. What happened? The students, that red line, who just learned the study skills, didn't seem to put them into practice. They continued to show declining grades. But those who got the growth mindset with the study skills showed a sharp rebound in their grades and were now doing significantly better in math than the other students. Recently, we've created an online interactive program called Brainology that teaches students a growth mindset. And I'd just love to show you a few of the screenshots to give you the idea of how we teach that growth mindset. Here's the learning brain reading a book. 2 hip teens, Chris and Dahlia, guided by the brain orb, they take on a series of quests to understand how their brain works. They visit the brain lab. They meet Dr. Cerebrus, the mad brain scientist, who shows them how the brain works and how it develops by growing new connections when they learn. They learn brain-based study strategies. They write reflections about their mind and their growth in their online e-journal. And at the end, they earn the Brain Master certificate. Aside from growth mindset interventions, creating differences in grades or achievement test scores, what I've been really struck by is how a growth mindset intervention transforms the meaning of effort and difficulty. And that's what kids tell us. That in a fixed mindset, effort and difficulty, that's when they feel dumb. But when they learn a growth mindset, effort and difficulty, that's when your neurons are making new connections. And that's, they now say, when they feel like they're becoming smarter. So, summary, a growth mindset allows students to embrace learning and growth instead of fretting all the time over how smart they are or aren't. It allows them to understand the role of effort in creating talent instead of thinking if you have talent you shouldn't need effort. It allows them to maintain confidence and effectiveness in the face of challenges and setbacks. That is, it allows them to be resilient, and it can be taught. I'd like to end with this thought. Every era is known by the way it views and treats its children. In the 1950s, I had a front row seat on an era that believed in fixed intelligence. Mrs. Wilson, my 6th grade teacher, who looked very much like that, believed in the IQ test. She seated us around the room in IQ order, even though we were already the top IQ class in the school. She did not let the lower IQ students carry a flag in the assembly, take a note to the principal, or even erase the blackboard or clap the erasers in the schoolyard. She thought the IQ score summarized not just your intelligence, but also your character, your being. Now, when the story of our era is told, how will we be described? How about as people who created growth mindset in students, as people who helped every student fulfill their potential by learning how to take on challenges, persist in the face of difficulty, and thrive, bounce back from failure. So the story of our era is now in your hands. Thank you.